Hello, you are listening to Above Paranormal Network. You can learn more by going to aboveparanormal.com.
This is Talking to the Dead with Fred. I'm a psychic medium and paranormal investigator based in San Antonio, Texas. This week's episode is all about our haunted ghost tracks here in San Antonio, Texas. I have with me my colleague, Ceso Hurtado. Correct? Okay, I just want to make sure.
That's right.
Author of The Ghost Tracks, a paranormal horror novel. So welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, we're excited to have you. I'd love for the audience just to kind of get to know you a little bit, to kind of get a little bit of your history. Like, we just want to learn about you and learn a little bit about your book, too. So
Sure. My name is Celso. I'm born and raised here in San Antonio, Texas. I've experienced my fair share of paranormal experiences here in town with my family, just various things that have happened to me. Those experiences made me want to write a book that delved into paranormal.
Nice.
Especially about obviously the ghost tracks, which is what my book is called. Went to college here in San Antonio. Have a 10-year-old daughter who keeps me busy, and I've been showing her scary movies for Halloween lately. So that's been a
Nice.
lot of fun exposing her to the good stuff.
Cool.
And that's it. I'm excited to talk about my book.
Awesome. Have you gotten to take your daughter to some of our haunted places as well?
Well, she is brave at the house.
Okay.
But not so much when we get out there. So
Okay.
I took her to a haunted house just to test the waters, and she wanted to, go home screaming. So
Yeah.
I'm
Like, was it a haunted house with actors, or was it just like a haunted house?
oh, with actors. So
Okay. All right. Well,
um,
that's different. Like, grown men do that.
that's true. That's true, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I am eager to get her out and see, what she feels, if she feels anything when she
Yeah.
goes to these places around town that are known for being these areas. I'm excited to share that with her.
Yeah, for sure. Now, just an open invitation. You're welcome to bring her anytime you want to one of our tours. We can give her a little bit of like San Antonio history, share all the kind of the legends and the lore, and also
Oh
all the
man,
true stories as well. So
that would be awesome.
yeah, so
I am
definitely bring
definitely
her.
taking
Yeah,
you up on
we
that. Yeah.
we have a Spirits of the Alamo and El Rio de San Antonio tour that's perfect for her age group. So
Awesome, man.
yeah,
That sounds
yeah,
great.
that'll be great. Yeah. So now, just a question. I know we hadn't talked about this, but do you feel that you're sensitive at all to spirit and spirit activity yourself?
That's a great question. I think the answer is that I'm not as sensitive as I'd like to be.
Okay.
Because I know that there are people like yourself
Sure.
who have it so strongly. And while I have had experiences, I know I haven't had as many or as deeply as other folks like you. And I wish I did.
Yeah.
I wish I did because when I have had them, they've been life changing.
Yeah.
You feel things that you wouldn't otherwise have felt.
Yeah.
Maybe you have realizations that you wouldn't have had otherwise. It's just a different, sensory perception.
Sure.
And I'm kind of, in awe and jealous a little bit of
Yeah.
folks who are more sensitive to it than I am.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the sensory perception is a really kind of a key thing. And like as a psychic medium myself, I kind of want to talk about that because, for me, I often get messages from spirit kind of, I guess, in a different way from like a haunt, like not necessarily
yeah.
scary, and a lot of times people will divide up the gifts that perhaps a medium will have or how they perceive. So one is like clear audio mediums that they just hear stuff. It's always hearing, and that's how they're able to identify spirit. And then there's also mediums that are clear visual, where they just see stuff. Like, it's like they can see it as if it was a movie, as it was happening, or like as me and you are just sitting next to each other having this the show. So that's clear visual. And then there's also clear knowing, where people like just kind of know in their gut. So I'm kind of a weirdo in a lot of ways because I get a little bit of all of this. I definitely am more of a seer, like just kind of being able to see, what spirit is telling me. But I also hear, which is actually really freaky to me because I'm like, where did that come from? And it takes me a while to grasp that. But also clear knowing is very much part of that. But, being an investigator, I've had experiences where I'm out in a haunted location, and I get the same experience and the same reaction almost as everybody else, because you see something, you feel cold in the room, or you kind of get a touch on your shoulder, you get something that
Right, right.
happens. It's still something that I think people are afraid of, but they're also grateful for. Like you're saying, like there's just this like the need for us to understand the paranormal, and I think that's why, even though your book is technically fiction, it's really great because it addresses that personal need for us to understand the paranormal, to understand what we can't necessarily see. Sometimes we can hear, but many of us feel that it's there. I think there's astonishing rates of over 50% of people now believe in spirits and spirit activity. And so I think it's just interesting that you're capitalizing off of the paranormal and a way that is exploratory. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think because that percentage that you used, about 50%,
Yeah.
that's because people are experiencing things, or they've known somebody who's experienced things. And I think that there's, like you were talking about, there's more out there.
Yeah.
Because life would be kind of empty if it was just this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think people need to feel that.
Sure.
And when they do feel it, it's such an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Right. Real quick, I was kind of laughing to myself when you said that when you hear the voices,
Yeah.
it's a little freaky, right? So, one of the experiences I have had, and this has happened kind of throughout my life, and I don't think, it's not coincidentally when I'm going through a rough patch, but there are various times in my life when I hear my grandmother's voice talking to me,
It's really
right?
beautiful.
And so, like I said, it's always when I'm in need of it.
Yeah.
And even though it is kind of jarring, it's welcome,
Yeah.
right?
For sure.
Because it just, I know she's there.
Yeah.
And I know that, she's watching over me. And, uh, you know, and she's calling my name.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And I
Yeah.
know it's so soothing. And
Yeah.
it's something that gives me hope, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
for sure. I kind of always end our tours with this saying, I love to tell ghost stories because I believe they give us hope. I
That's
believe they
right.
give
That's
us hope
right.
that there's
That's,
something
yeah.
else beyond this life. And I think that's really powerful. And I think it's really cool that you've chosen to write in a really raw way that explores human emotion and in an honest way. Because I mean, you have a character that is kind of a fraud, but I think that is so honest and so real and creates such a beautiful sense, in this novel, and I mean, can you tell us a little bit more
Sure.
about the book? We want to know all about it, and also tell us where people can look at it, view it, buy
Sure.
it, or hopefully buy it, all
Sure.
that good stuff.
Sure. So, yeah. So as far as him being a fraud, that is exactly right. The character is called Erasmo Cruz, and he pretends to be what you are. He pretends to be a paranormal investigator, an expert, because he's desperate for money and he wants to scam people to make some easy cash.
Yeah.
So he places an ad online pretending to be an expert, and he takes on 3 clients. And these clients all have, different things that they're claiming.
Sure.
The first one claims that he's being chased by a spirit who blames him for the death of somebody that he may or may not have caused.
Cool.
The next person claims that God is putting visions of the future into their head.
Okay.
And the last client claims that her son is possessed by a demon. And like you said, he's trying to scam them. He's a skeptic. He doesn't believe.
Sure.
But during the course of the book, he experiences things like we've talked about, things that can't be explained by rational ideas.
Yeah.
And a large part of the book is him trying to determine, are these things truly paranormal? Are these people disturbed? And, his eyes, let's say his eyes are opened during the course of the book.
Okay, great. Yeah, and so can you tell us, where one might be able to see
Yes,
that or how,
absolutely.
all the ins and outs for us?
So the link to pre-order the book is on inkshares.com. That's INKSHARES. I've submitted it into a contest, and
Nice.
the books with the most pre-orders will be published next year. So I'm really trying to get the word out about this book, have people go pre-order it,
Okay.
so I can get it out into the world.
Yeah, and so if you pre-order it, what's the cost?
The cheapest version is $10
Okay,
for an
great.
electronic version. The physical book is $20.
Okay, great. I have to go order mine today then.
Great,
That's
I'd
awesome.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So now, what made you really want to be a writer? What made you choose to tell stories?
You know, the reason that I wanted to write books in general, and in this one specifically, is connecting with people,
Yeah,
right? Like right now, we're having a great conversation
sure.
about paranormal, about our experiences. And so I think it's just a way to have a broader conversation with people, to interest people, to entertain people. And as far as the topic of why something regarding a local legend, why the paranormal, like I said, it's just always something that's interested me. It's something that my family have had many experiences. The ghost tracks is a very kind of San Antonio thing that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to include parts of our city in the book. That's where a lot of that came from.
Cool. Awesome. Well, while we're on that topic of the ghost tracks, can you tell me about them? Like, we want the audience obviously to
Sure.
know about it. So
Sure.
yeah.
So the ghost tracks are a famous legend here in San Antonio. There, as the story goes, is a haunted stretch of railroad tracks on the south side of town. And as it's told, there was a bus full of school children in the 1940s that became stuck on the tracks and were hit by a train. And they all died, and their ghosts haunt that stretch of tracks.
Okay.
So if a car is left on the railroad tracks right now, today, the story goes that the ghost children will push your vehicle off the tracks to safety, to save you from
Okay.
the same fate that befell them. And if you sprinkle some baby powder on the back of your vehicle, you will see the hands of the ghost children that saved you.
Okay, great. Now, can you like? I mean, this is a story that is really famous. Like, I think it's been on Unsolved Mysteries.
That's right.
Back in the day. Zach Baggins had it on. Ghost Adventures. It's been kind of all over our local media. There's been articles written about it. Dosha Williams, the historian, wrote about it. She did videos about it. I mean, it's really, really iconic in San Antonio, but it's also been completely debunked, and I would love for you to tell us that portion of it. Now we know, this, but can you tell me that portion?
Sure, absolutely. So when the research was done into it, a very interesting thing was found out, and that is that there never was an accident with a school bus full of children in San Antonio. There was an accident with a school bus full of children, but it was in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Yeah,
And somehow San Antonio took on the story as their own
yeah,
over the years. But yeah, there's a lot of evidence that that never happened. In addition, the reason that the vehicles move off the tracks is just the lay of the land.
yeah,
It's nothing special. And when you sprinkle the baby powder on the back of the vehicle, you're really just showing your own handprints.
yeah.
So it's been thoroughly debunked. However, you and I were actually having a conversation before this, and if you could talk a little about your idea about maybe how we might have been involved in something being there.
Well, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I want to also kind of clarify a few things
Of
on it.
course.
So, the idea is how we got that legend in San Antonio is that they published this photo in the paper in the San Antonio Express, and I believe the Light, but don't quote me on that. Both of them publish, this article about this really tragic accident, and they publish a photo, and in the actual body of the article, it doesn't mention any city, either San Antonio or Salt Lake City, Utah. It doesn't mention anything, but they took a photo of the intersection, and it's here in San Antonio. If you want to visit it, you can literally just Google, haunted ghost tracks, and Google will take you straight to it. But for perspective, it looked just like this corner, of train off of Shane Road, train tracks off of Shane Road, and just right down the street from Mission San Juan. And so people saw the photo in the paper and they're like, oh man, I know exactly where that is. However, right under the photo, there's just like this little line that said that this accident happened in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so, I mean, I don't know if it's a claim to just reading it super quick or just kind of making assumptions or perhaps even a little bit of illiteracy in the city. But, definitely it followed this crazy start of a legend, and people would say that they would hear cries. They would hear cries in the middle of the night of children. And the truth is they heard something, that's for sure.
Sure.
But what
Yeah.
they were actually hearing was ostriches. Half a mile up the road, there was an ostrich farm, and when ostriches mate, they make this They make this horrible wailing sound, as if they were, being hurt or dying or whatever. And so people were just hearing the ostriches, and then people would also say, well, all of the streets in the neighborhoods around Shane Road, these are all named after the children who died on the bus tracks, which would be great and all, but the truth is that we had a mall here in the city of San Antonio, and it was Macrilas Mall, and it's no longer really here, but it's kind of like an outdoor shopping center now. But the developer, the guy who developed that mall and the space and the area, he had the money and the means, and so he decided to buy the names of all those streets to name them after his grandchildren. So they weren't named after that, but I mean, it was an easy assumption
That's
for
right.
people
Yeah.
to jump to. And then, like you said, the fingerprints, on our hands, just on a day-to-day basis, we have natural oil. So we touch a flat surface, like I'm touching this, this iPad thing right here. That is going to be transferred to that surface. And if you've seen CSI or any crime show, first thing they do, there's a crime, they fingerprint. So the powder is just illuminating those prints. So of course, it's just literally our own fingerprints and anybody who's touched our car since our last car wash. But it's really a phenomenon in the city. And I guarantee people, if they go out there tonight, it's a Monday night, it's not a lot going on the south side, but if you go out there tonight, you are going to definitely see people trying to have their car
That's right.
pushed by this. It happens all the time, especially during Halloween.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But I think it's really interesting, and I'm gonna save that other part for the end.
Okay.
Because I want to touch on that after we do some stuff. So we're gonna get to perhaps how the legend furthers and the plot thickens there, for us. But I think that it's significant. The South Side is primarily been a Latino neighborhood, and we really have a lot of ghost stories in the South Side of San Antonio. And being a South Sider and loving the South Side, I've always adored all of our legends and our stories behind that. And I think that most of the people who have written about these legends in the past, they've all been white folks, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I just think it's really cool that you're a Latino writer and you are sharing that from, I think also a Latino perspective. A lot of the characters in your book are Latino. So, just as a Latino writer, I think within horror and paranormal, I think you're kind of, really kind of breaking ground, at least in this city. And so can you tell me a little bit about, how you see the scene for other Latino writers and maybe any kind of advice that you would have for them?
Sure. So, that's a great point. We just don't see a lot of Latino horror, paranormal writers. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to write this book, because I just felt there's not enough representation. As far as advice, I would say, definitely you want to have a story that doesn't necessarily, couldn't be told by somebody else per se, right?
Sure.
Because if that's the case, then anyone could write it. So something that's going to speak more specific to your experiences, to your community's experiences, to your families. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of specific to some of the things that happened to me when I grew up with my family, just here in San Antonio. So, stand out by including your own kind of, persona as a Latino, right?
Yeah.
But really just write, just get out there. Because I
Yeah.
think a lot of what holds people back are maybe it seems too daunting to them. They want to write something, or it can be anything, not to be writing.
Yeah.
But just, for lack of a better term from Nike, just do it. Because once you sit down and whatever, write a sentence a day, write a page a day, you'll have something, and you'll have something. Everyone has something important and unique to
Yeah.
say, and everybody should.
Yeah. Well, it's great. That's great advice, and coming from, a Latino background myself, there are very few, I think, companies that deal with the paranormal, like, and do ghost tours, and, like, and we're much more than
Right, yeah.
than just a ghost tour company. We do investigations, and also, like, opposite of your character, we don't charge for any of our ghost investigations.
That's awesome.
We do that, for free. We know people are suffering, and we do that. But we do investigations. We do the tours. I'm a psychic medium. I meet with people. I help people. I do, I consult with, businesses about haunts that they have. And I don't meet a lot of Latinos in the industry, and it's really cool because I feel like it's a story that people are interested in. People are interested in a lot of these things from different multicultural perspectives, and not just the Latino perspective, but the Black perspective, the
Absolutely,
Asian
yeah.
perspective. All of these things becoming a really big part of who we are and how we share stories. And I love that you're talking about your daughter, and she's 10 years old, and you're exposing her to some of this stuff. I think that's really great to do, and because I think a lot of young people, they just need to hear that their stories, no matter what perspective they are
Absolutely,
from,
yeah.
need to be told,
Right,
and so
right.
start telling them. So I really, really love that. And I know that you're here as a fictional writer, but you do have some great characteristics within the paranormal and just kind of about you. But I'm kind of curious of why this platform, why a platform of really a show that's about spirit communication was really important for you to share about this novel that you wrote.
Sure, sure. Um, well, first of all, and I'm not just saying this, right? I do kind of appreciate what you do, right?
Thank you.
Because, I actually, I've been on the tours before, and I do think it's important the way that y'all educate, really.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, getting the stories out there. And so, selfishly, I just kind of wanted to be on the show, right? Just in
Yeah.
general, because this is great.
Nice.
It's great to be doing this with you. But also, I think that your audience would enjoy a book about these kind of paranormal phenomena. I was telling you earlier that one of the characters in the book actually reaches out to Erasmo, the main character, to get in touch with a dead relative, kind of what you do, right? And so, but he can't, but you can, right?
Yeah.
And so I just thought this was a great way to come on, and I wanted to hear stories from you. I wanted to tell you about the book, and it's been a great experience so far.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love that, and and one thing that I want to add to that, because I think it's really important. I'm kind of a believer that all of us have a power to communicate with spirit, and
Yeah.
and it's about learning how to tap into our subconscious, about trusting our instincts, and about really appreciating. I try to teach spirit communication, and I really love teaching that because I feel that it's really important for a lot of us. And I come from a background of curandissimo, and I had my grandparents I had that were involved in that, and great grandparents involved in curandissimo, Huerta Botanica in Corpus, and to come from that and to share that kind of perspective, I think is really powerful, because it used to be spirit communication and
Hmm.
these kinds of things that you're talking about used to be really part of our American foundation in the
Sure.
1800s,
Yeah.
and it's kind of went away, and I find like it's almost kind of funny because people tend not to be scared of our own histories anymore.
Mm.
They're so obsessed with just the horror aspect of this, and I think it's really impressive that you chose to share part of your own history as a San Antonian,
Yeah.
and I think that's really powerful. And I would hope that that we hear some of these stories,
Right.
again in the
Sure.
city. Yeah,
Sure. Can I ask you a question real quick?
yeah,
So you just mentioned that you try to teach this.
yeah.
Is there kind of one main thing that would someone should do if they're trying to kind of learn how to
Sure.
do it? Is there any kind of big overarching kind of advice you could give?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that talking to spirit, you have to trust yourself. You
Mm.
have to have a sense of
Okay.
trust in yourself. You have to say, maybe I won't hear anything today. Maybe nothing will happen. Maybe I won't get an image.
I
But
see.
it's as simple as closing your eyes and asking spirit to show you something. And
Okay.
then what is that you see? Okay, write that down. And starting a practice. What I tell people, you can use any kind of instrument for spirit communication. You can use a Ouija board, you can use rods, you can use a pendulum, you can just use automatic writing, scrying, whatever you want. Literally, you can use anything and everything to communicate with spirit. It's all good. But the thing that you really need, the thing that you live without is respect. We have to be respectful of the
Mm.
spirits. We have to set that up in a lot of ways. And so I tell people you need respect. You also
Right.
need peace. You need to be peaceful with yourself. You need to be
Mm.
peaceful about the subject. You need love. You need to be coming at this from a sense of love.
Wow.
And another thing that you need is patience, because if
Mm.
you're not patient, it becomes like, oh, a joke, and it's not necessarily that at all. It's not a joke. I mean, I think, for hundreds of and thousands of years, really, people have been communicating with spirits or believe they've been communicating with
Right.
spirits. So, what's changed now? I don't think anything really. I think it's just, our perceptions, our
Mm.
attitudes. You know, how science has affected our mindset.
Mm.
So I think that's what you really need to communicate with spirit. It's very simple, and what I tell people, if you come into this afraid, if you're afraid of having spirit talk to you,
Sure.
then don't talk to a spirit.
Right.
Like, that's the whole
Right.
point, and so you really have to come at it with that peace angle, because any kind of fear, I'm sure you've seen the movie or you've heard, somebody had a horrible experience with a Ouija board, and a spirit board, whatever you want to call it. And I think that really literally comes from a lack of respect often,
Mm.
a lack of understanding and love and patience and peace. But if you come at things like that, it really is very, very helpful, and you can learn about yourself and experience things. And I mean, if nothing else, you learn to be a more patient person that way, I think.
Wow.
But yeah, and I think that's important for people to utilize. And people ask, well, what is spirit communication? And the simplest way of doing this, and is or spirit communication, or even ancestral worship. If you want to even link them together, is, have you ever went to a cemetery and left someone flowers? That's the
Mm.
simplest form of that. It's
Yeah.
like you have
Yeah.
an intent behind that flower, behind leaving it at a cemetery, and that's honor. And so if you're sharing some kind of honor, you're sharing some kind of love, it really makes sense. Another thing that's important is, like, if you want to start a practice, spiritualists, kind of followed this, is that you would always meet to do this at a certain time on a certain day, and it almost becomes where the spirits know you're there.
Ah.
They're there.
Yeah.
Sorry, they're there. Waiting for you. They're to communicate. And I think making a practice out of it is really important. But there are some people that, yeah, especially in the ideas of curandissimo and voodoo and santeria, that believe that often when we begin a journey of working with our ancestors, working with spirit, that we don't necessarily even ever hear anything for a year. Sometimes all we're doing is giving. until
Right,
spirit is
right.
ready, until we're ready to listen and hear. So I think it's all about also preparation. But really good
Oh,
question.
that's a great answer.
Yes.
What you're saying about coming at it from a perspective of love and patience,
Yeah.
that's really interesting because I would guess that folks that are trying to do it on their own, that's not what they're doing. Like you said, they might be scared,
Yeah.
they may not be in a good place with themselves. So thanks for that. That's really
Yeah,
helpful.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking the question. It's a good one.
sure.
Now, I know that this is, there's some personal elements in this book. I mean, there obviously has to, because you're utilizing the city that you grew up in, you're
Yeah.
utilizing your culture in this. But do you have any family kind of references? Were they any inspiration for this book? And can you tell me about that?
Sure. So most of the inspiration was just kind of the experiences that I've had with them in general
Yeah.
that we've shared over the years. I'll tell this story about my uncle. He had a house that I kept hearing was haunted, that there was a
Yeah.
ghost in there, there was some kind of a presence there. And so, I went over to his house and I was trying to hear anything. I didn't hear anything. So finally, I put my ear up to one of the walls where they said they'd been hearing a lot of noise. And then out of nowhere, bam! Right in my ear, something behind the wall. I ran out, and I probably didn't go to my uncle's for like a year after that. I was
Wow.
so terrified.
In a
But
Latino family, that's probably not acceptable.
yeah, I said, we're meeting at my other uncle's. But, it was those kind of experiences that kind of led me to want to write a book that had those kinds of things in it. So
Sure.
that specific example isn't in the book, but just the kind of general kind of, you know, uh, way we grew up, let's say.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And you mentioned that paranormal experience, but like, have you had any other paranormal experiences that, one that interests you, or two that have inspired you in some way?
Um, yeah, I've had multiple ones over the years. Like I said, not as many as I'd like, but another one. You had mentioned earlier about rooms that get real cold,
Yeah.
and that happened to me as well. I was doing some renovations on a house when I was younger, and I walked into a room, and it was the middle of summer, and I could just see my breath.
Hmm.
And that particular thing actually got me to want to write a story about it, right?
Yeah.
And so that is actually when I started writing. I'm like, wow, how can that be? There
Yeah.
must have been something in that room. And so I wrote a short story about it.
Okay.
And that kind of started to lead me down the path of wanting to write more about these
Okay,
things.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, I guess the paranormal is part of a reason why you are a
Oh, no,
writer.
absolutely. I mean, it's not a coincidence that my first book has many paranormal elements to it and is based on this legend here in
Sure.
San Antonio. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So now, like, do you know kind of how, I guess, from a paranormal investigational standpoint, of how the cold spots work, since you mentioned that?
Could you enlighten me?
Yeah, so how that works is, of course, any kind of entity, we're all, like, even as a human, we have energy. We're electric in a lot of ways. We have kind of a circuit that runs through us. And so it is believed that often the spirit has that kind of same backing. And so the idea is that we need an energy source. We need a charger, we need that USB cable. And so whenever you feel a cold spot, what's happened is that, or at least what parapsychologists kind of believe, is that a spirit has sucked all the warmth out of that area, depleting it, making it cold, so it can manifest, so it can be, able to kind of show, experience. Somebody can experience something off of it, but it's basically, in some ways, for lack of better words, trying to get noticed, trying to say hello, trying to, manifest itself.
Wow. No, I did not know
Okay.
that. Wow,
Yeah. So
that's
I mean, that's a
amazing.
basic concept. I mean, there may
Yeah.
be more scientific ways of explaining that, but I'm trying to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's why, like, in investigations, we'll use, like, a temperature gauge, so we can see, hey, is there any fluctuation in temperature? And sometimes we'll get, like, you'll be in a room, it's, 100 degrees, and then it's we're in Texas, it gets pretty hot in
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
and then you go over and to an area and now it's 60 degrees, and that's happened, and that's like that's kind of intense. I think that's one of the more intense things that I experience every now and then, is feeling a drop in temperature. And I think one of the for me, one of the things that have been the creepiest is kind of like doing an investigation and then feeling something just ice cold right on my shoulder, and it's like that's because you just
Yeah.
feel that there. um, and I think that you have skeptics, of course, that like, oh, that was this, or it was a nerve problem, but I think you'll never be able to necessarily convince a skeptic,
Right,
of
right.
what. But I know that these experiences, like, I don't, how can I explain like an icy cold like presence feeling on
Right.
my shoulder, just like you can't explain exactly that cold room that you could see your breath in the middle of a San Antonio summer.
That's right. That's right. No, it was like you said, it was one of the more intense experiences of my life for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other paranormal experiences that you want to share?
So, now let me preface this by saying that I don't know if you categorize this as truly paranormal,
Sure.
but I thought about this event a lot over the years, trying to reconcile it in my mind. But I will tell you what happened. I was 17. I was in my bedroom, and I heard like a little scratching, clawing at my window.
Sure.
Now this is about say 2 in the morning or so. So sure it was a cat or something, So I just let it go. I heard it again. So I said, well, let me go look. So I went. I opened up the curtain, and I don't even know how to explain it, but for lack of a better term, there was something looking back at me. The closest I can maybe say is almost like a goblin,
Okay.
but just this horribly terrifying face.
Yeah.
And then it hissed at me, and then it ran off.
Interesting.
And so that's kept me awake for years. And
Yeah.
I can't begin to tell you what it may or may not have been, but I know I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I kind of had a decently similar experience, and but it involved my whole family. I wasn't by myself, and
Oh,
we, this was a long time ago. This was like, do you remember when Dallas was still playing
Oh,
on
yeah,
air?
yeah, yeah.
So like my family is all watching Dallas. We're all in the living room together, and we have this bay window, and the sofa's against the bay window, and I'm laying like on the sofa, and one of my like aunts is on the other side of the sofa, and we're all watching Dallas. Like it's like this big deal, and all of a sudden we hear like a big thump, like a really big thump, and we look towards the window. That's where it came from, and there was this hand on the window, but it was like,
Oh my God.
I don't know how to explain the hand. It was like almost like it glowed, but it looked extremely bruised, like if it had been run over or something, just like crazy, and it was all bruised, and it was so loud, and I just remember seeing it probably, for maybe 15 seconds. It was just there, and then it like just disappeared, and my grandfather, he ran out of the house because he thought maybe somebody's trying to break in or whatever. Ran out of the house, and he looked around, and he like ran down the block, and he found absolutely nothing.
Wow.
And I've never ever forgotten
Yeah, I
that.
hear
It's
you, man.
similar to
Yeah.
that, where we see things that we just can't explain. And I really don't like to touch too much on the demonic, because I feel like a lot of shows, kind of stretch the truth with
Sure,
that.
sure.
You see, oh my God, it was a demon, and all this kind of stuff, and we kind of just feel like, yeah, that's possible, it happened, but it's few and far
Sure,
between.
yeah.
But I think perhaps just spirits come back in forms that we don't really understand. It may
Yeah,
have
that makes
be that
sense.
they
Yeah.
harbored negativity, they harbored stuff that was really crappy, whatever it was. I always tell people, you meet people in life that you really enjoy. You want to go have a beer with, let's go have dinner, grab lunch, whatever, and then you meet people in life that you're like, no.
Yeah.
like you can't stand. And I kind of feel like that's the same with the spirit world, and we there's just so much that we don't really know about how we receive an apparition, how we receive a haunt,
Yeah.
So I always caution people, don't just assume it's a demon, be very careful with
Sure.
that,
Sure.
because you may freak yourself out more than an apparition. Even the friendliest of apparitions can scare us. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. No,
pointing
that's
that
a
out
great
is good.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what has been just like your overall inspiration, for, writing in horror genre?
Um, I've just always been a fan. Like growing up,
All right.
The Shining had a huge impact on me when I was a kid. It just scared the crap out of me. To this day, I still get a little freaked out about it,
Really?
right?
All right.
And so, Poltergeist, that had a
Yeah,
huge
yeah,
impact on me as well. And I just found them, to really stretch your experiences while you're watching them,
yeah,
right? So you feel something. And the the interest I felt, the fear I felt watching
yeah.
it sometimes, the way it made me think about things in different ways, like all the things that you're talking about, right?
Sure.
Okay, well maybe it's scary to me, but maybe I don't know the full picture of what's going on. Maybe he doesn't mean to be scary.
Yeah,
Maybe this is my own perception of what it is,
yeah,
right? But because those kind of extreme emotions take place in these horror movies and films and things that have happened with our families, right?
yeah.
I just felt it was a genre I could do a lot with.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I kind of feel like horror is really important. Like, I think for men in general sometimes, because often, society in America tells us, and even as a Latino tells you, you're not supposed to get freaked out. You're supposed to be tough. You're supposed to be,
Right.
strong, like the whole machismo, like, attitude there. And when you're in the theater and you're watching a horror film, like if a dude jumps a little bit, nobody
Yeah.
notices that.
You're
It's
right.
kind of like it's a safe environment to express our fears and our doubts, and I think, like, as a man, I think it's a really it's a genre that is really kind of important to that. But also, as a man, it's really important to say, like, it's okay to be scared, it's okay to be freaked out, it's okay to have emotion as well. And I think that horror has been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, that's such a great point because that's probably one of the few places where it's acceptable
Yeah,
for men to
yeah,
show fear, right?
yeah.
Wow, that's a great point. I hadn't really thought about it that way before. Yeah, that's
Cool.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's always interested me. Maybe that's why I've liked it. But what's one of your favorite horror films?
My favorite, I'm gonna have to stick with The Shining.
The Shining. All right.
Yeah, just because there were so many great elements to it.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with a haunted hotel, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but the imagery,
Sure.
like that guy in that bunny suit
Mm.
in the room,
Mm-hmm.
the blood coming from the elevators,
Sure.
and that the those kind of images have stayed with me. In the book,
Yeah.
I tried to create some interesting images kind of based on that. That's what people remember.
Yeah.
But that one, I'd have to say, I mean, this is a little cliched, but the original Halloween,
Okay.
really,
Yeah.
really, really enjoyed that. Although, slasher movies are not normally my favorite,
Yeah.
but I think that one did
It
have
was well
an
done.
effect. It was
Yeah.
very
It was
well
well
done.
done.
I
It
mean,
explores raw emotion.
no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, they're still making them, so
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But yeah, Halloween. I would say, well, I don't know if this is sci-fi or horror, but the original Alien, had a
Okay.
huge
Yeah. Yeah. I
impact.
think it's a little both. So yeah.
A little bit of both. Yeah, my parents left me alone with the VHS and said, "Hey, watch Alien. I heard it's good."
Nice.
Oh man, I was not prepared for
The
that
best
alien to go.
parenting.
They did. So, those all had a huge impact
Yeah,
on me. Yeah.
yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I think for me, Alfred Hitchcock was like a really like big inspiration, and I think The Bird, this idea of our environment
Oh yeah,
changing,
yeah.
and playing a part, and in the paranormal, like I also feel like if you look at that from a paranormal perspective, like could that be traced? Like even the idea of the birds and all these birds changing direction and flocking together
Sure,
and not
yeah.
knowing, could like that even be based on a simple understanding of electromagnetic fields deepening, changing, with our environment, and as our environment changes, over time, will that have an effect on the paranormal?
Yeah, no.
Understanding that as
Yeah,
well.
that's a great point. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of curious, like, I think we may have touched a little bit already on this, but the ghost tracks, I mean, it's a super amazing staple of San Antonio and San Antonio folklore. But why did you, as a person, choose this as your subject?
Well, part of the reason is because I actually had an experience at the ghost tracks myself, not a paranormal
That was
one.
my next question.
Yeah, yeah. But a long story short, I was with some friends down at the ghost tracks, and there was a car accident, and this car missed the turn and just wrecked, and it kind of started the wheels turning. Like, I wonder what would happen here if there was
Yeah.
just a body laying on the tracks. Would these ghost children come and remove this body like they would remove the car?
Yeah.
And so, this may or may not have happened to the main character. So that's kind of the impetus for it.
Okay. Okay. So that's a good point and just a good understanding of that. That's
Yeah.
really cool. So just what would be like if you're going to continue to write and continue to share, like what's kind of your next step? Like where do you see yourself going? Especially, I'm hoping that it's in like the horror and paranormal
Yeah.
genres. But where's the next step for you?
That's a good question. I have a couple of different projects that I'm kind of working on right now. One of them is paranormal because that's just kind of my natural inclination.
Yeah.
I do have one that is a mixture of horror and suspense that I'm also working on. Nothing to do with the paranormal.
Okay.
Kind of, it's a little bit like, let's say, remember The Game with Michael Douglas? Like, it would include a group that say, instead of giving an experience like they do for Michael Douglas, they do a similar thing, but this is a group whose only purpose is to frighten you and scare you.
Okay.
So one could hire them, let's say, to frighten you with your
Okay.
worst nightmares.
I think
let's
that's
say.
a real thing. Like,
Yeah.
I think that there are small businesses that actually like do that.
So this, yeah, so this will be a fictionalized account of
I love that.
what happens with one of these
I love
groups.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps that'll be inspirational for some of the groups that are currently out there.
Maybe.
So now, while we're kind of on the subject of horror, the paranormal, all this kind of stuff, is there a haunted place in the world that you feel is important and the most haunted that you want to share about?
I don't really have a great answer for that, other than my aforementioned uncle's house, because every time I go back there, I do feel something.
Sure.
To this day, I feel presences in that house, and so I try not to stay longer than I have to sometimes, because normally when I felt things, they haven't felt threatening to me. Like I said, I hear my grandmother, and in other times I've experienced feelings of hope with different things.
Yeah.
Over there, though, I don't know. That's the one time where it's not as great a feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that may be normal for us, just kind of on the idea that some ghosts are crappy, some aren't, but also some things are going to be oppressive. If one spirit would I have a friend that I'm going to point it out this way, like he's always posting on Facebook, and it's always like this doom and gloom, and it's like it's like. I got let go of, my dog got hit by a car. Like, I'm not trying to make fun of that at all. But it's just like always something. I broke my glasses. It's just like one thing after the next. And he always points out all the negative. He never, ever, ever points out anything positive. And I think that perhaps, if that person were to pass away, that they would be the kind of spirit that would make people feel uncomfortable, make people feel like it just negative.
That makes
negative.
total sense. Yeah.
We do have spirits in our lives, and that are great because they were full of love. They cared about us. That it's almost I like this idea is that a lot of people, when somebody dies, they're like, well, now I have an angel. And that idea, like, probably isn't true because, like, if you kind of just look at the order of things, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me, at least.
Right.
But do our ancestors help us?
Mm.
Spirits that we once knew, do they still have our backs? And I think the answer is probably yes. At least
Yeah.
in my experience is a definite yes. And I think that those negative and oppressive and depressed spirits in general tend to linger and tend to be intense. I'm sure you walked into a room and somebody had been arguing,
Oh,
had
yeah.
some kind of fight with
Sure.
one another, and you get in and you feel it. You just
Yeah.
feel it resonating in the room, and it's kind of just like, this is awkward.
Yeah, isn't that amazing that
Yeah.
without any words being said, you didn't hear anything, you walk in and feel that?
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. But I think it just goes to the sense that, we have these perceptory abilities that we
Yeah.
don't even always know are there.
For sure, yeah, and I think that, like, looking at, perhaps, the idea is even something simple like that, where you walk into a room and you feel that energy. Could we even explore the idea of that residual haunt with that? And I think there's one tour that I went on. We travel all around trying to do tours and learn from other people, and we did this one tour where there was this hotel, and they were telling us that there's this one particular area of the hotel that seems to hold on to residual energy. So you're there, you're talking, and then maybe the next day you almost hear that same conversation you had the day before just replaying.
Oh,
So the
wow.
idea that we don't need to be dead to necessarily haunt a place, I think that's really cool, like
Wow.
a
Yeah,
cool
that's
concept,
yeah.
and I the idea of even the word haunt, I don't know if you know kind of the background of that, but haunt originally was more used in language to describe a place that was inhabited, emotions were left, these kinds of things. But it wasn't until Shakespeare who came along and wrote about, a haunting and the idea of it being an actual ghost.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's very
Shakespeare is the
interesting.
one that
Yeah.
did that and kind of changed, the perceptions that we had. And of course, his stuff was fiction, like you, but look at that kind of impact that it has on
Yeah.
society. It's pretty cool, I think.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So now I'm really curious. This book is super interesting to me. Is there any hidden messages that are in that book, in the title or the book itself, that you want to tell us about?
Sure. Well, the main thing about the title is it obviously refers to the ghost tracks, the literal ghost tracks, but I also intended it to mean the manner in which traumas that happen to us, people that we've met over time, how they stay with you,
Yeah,
how they leave scars or tracks, in this
yeah,
case, the ghost tracks, and how you, over time, have to deal with those things that have happened to you and come to terms with them, right?
yeah,
The main character in the book, his parents abandoned him at a young age because they were both heroin addicts. And so he spent the rest of his life dealing with the ghosts of that, right?
yeah,
And his life has kind of unfolded in the haphazard way it has because of that. And so he's going through a journey. And in the book, by the time the book kind of comes to an end, he's, ended another leg of that journey and has learned more about himself and has, tried to deal with the ghosts of the past.
yeah. I kind of like it's almost maybe even maybe I'm wrong, but is it almost a play on words, tracks and heroin usage in general?
That is exactly what it is,
Okay.
right? Because there is a scene in the book where he's imagining the father he never met with tracks up and down his arm. So
Yeah.
that is 100% right. And this is something a lot of families are dealing with, just addiction in general with the opioid
Yeah.
crisis and all that. And you would ask, well, why did you write about this? And part of it was this happened to me at the ghost tracks, right? I saw this accident.
Yeah.
But I had another kind of string of ideas. Well, you hear about these kids being born addicted, right?
Yeah.
They're screaming, they're crying. But like, well, what happens to them when they grow up? Like, so I just thought it'd be interesting to hear a story about somebody that grew up and kind of how his life unfolded. But and then I married it with some supernatural stuff. So
I love that.
I just thought it'd be interesting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us have had had somebody that we've known that had faced addiction, and some of that times that haunts us, and like, my own personal kind of backing to that is my biological father. He was addicted to alcohol and drugs, and he was never really, able to be in the picture because of those addictions. And he passed away a couple of years ago, and just through a really interesting like spirit channeling session, like I didn't even know he had passed away, and he comes through, and it's like this really strong of wanting to seek forgiveness and wanting to say I'm sorry, through a spirit communication session, and it was just really, really impressive and beautiful for me, and I really
Yeah.
identify with this story because it's like it's about healing, and
Exactly. Yeah.
and I think that the spirit world often offers healing to us, and sometimes we're also lucky and fortunate enough to offer a little bit of healing to the spirit world itself, and tell these stories from an honest perspective, and that can be very healing from a spiritual standpoint to spirit, of just being honest. And I think it's cool that you've done that.
Wow, that's a powerful story you just shared. Thanks for
No
sharing
problem.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the story, and I really hope that people pick up this novel and read it and go and pre-order it, and it gets published and it's all over the place. One, because I really believe that it's a cool story, and it explores um, emotion and raw emotion and family dynamics, and I think it's a needed thing in our world to do that, and perhaps there's some tracks to hope within the whole novel itself.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, inkshares.com. I'm trying to get as many pre-orders as possible so I can get this book published. And I'd appreciate any support.
Yeah, awesome. Is there anything else that you want to ask me or that you want to share with our audience? We have a few more minutes.
Yeah, I do have one thing. The tracks are on the south side,
Yeah.
and I know that you're well versed in all the stories, and I'd like to hear a story from the south side if you have one.
Sure. So I'll tell you kind of two real quick.
Great.
So the home, and we're recording out of my home as well, so the audience members know that. The home that we live in is actually is haunted. We have a lot of interesting things that'll happen here. We've seen a man that and I am on the south side, we've seen a man walk back and forth, almost avoiding us completely. But he's walked back and forth. We do also have a haunted collection, so we have some haunted artifacts, and we have a doll that's pretty haunted named Irene, and Irene tends to like to
Wow.
play with balls and to move things and whatnot. Irene is pretty old. She's like 70 something years old, and so we actually have her encased in a certain way. It's not really encased, she's tied down on the bottom so she can't move or hurt herself or break herself, but she's been known to move a lot. And then we actually have we had a dog that we had for 22 years and passed away, and she never really quite left the space. Like, we'll hear her like occasionally, like eating like at her bowl,
Wow.
like her, like it's almost like a metal clink of her, the tags that she has and whatnot. And we do have a decent amount of activity in the house, and we're on the south side, and we also like to kind of say, I think that people who are very close to train tracks will often get activity, because that is a source of energy,
Right,
that
right.
movement, and so we are just a couple of blocks away from the train tracks here, so we kind of think that perhaps that's part of that energy. But also the last part of the little story that I'll share with you is the Donkey Lady Bridge, and I'm sure if you're from San Antonio, you
Yeah.
know this story, and or at least if you're from the south or west side, you know the story. Maybe you've heard the north side, you haven't heard it, but but growing up, I heard this story, and the kind of a condensed version is that there was this woman who lived in a little home off the banks of the Salado, and she lived there, and she had a little barn and a donkey. And one day, there were actually several days, there's this little boy that would play off the banks of the Salado, and he would harass this donkey. And one day, the donkey bites the kid. The kid freaks out, runs home, tells his affluent rich parents what has happened. And they actually send their servants to come and burn down the barn to kill the donkey. And and they're successful. They light it on fire and whatnot, but the fire spreads and it goes into the home. And this woman, she is stuck inside this burning home, kind of, doesn't know what to do. Finally, she's able to make her way out, and she is badly burned, and her fingers and her toes have started fusing together from the burn and healing together. So it kind of gives her this appearance of a donkey-like hooves. And, after she died, it said that she just never left the area, that, she just
Right. Yeah.
lingered. So local legend says if you go
Yeah,
out
yeah.
there, you park your car, and you begin to honk your car and scream obscenities at the donkey lady, that she's going to come and she's going to jump on, the hood of your car, and she's going to make a dent for you.
That's right.
I've never done that part, I don't want to mess with insurance, but,
Yeah.
I went out there once with a friend, and it was kind of just like in the middle of the night. It was like in October, close to Halloween, and we drive out there. We get out of our car, we walk to the bridge, and as we walk to the bridge, we see a group of people in a circle, and they're holding hands. They are dressed all in black. They have black hoods on, and they're like mumbling, and it was enough to creep the like crap out of us that we
That
like
is
literally
amazing.
like we say that we walked, but I think we ran back to the car, and it took me a while to ever go back, but San Antonio is filled with amazing stories, and
That's
I think
right. Yeah.
perhaps it's because we have a very old history of indigenous populations living and thriving in this part of the world, and perhaps it's because the city has experienced a lot of trauma over the years, but. I'm definitely fascinated about it. I'm definitely fascinated that you chose to write about our city, and that's why we wanted to have you on the show. But I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing your story and sharing this book with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me. It had a great time.
Yeah, if any of you listeners have any questions about haunts, or perhaps a question that you want a medium to answer, please feel free to send us an email at CuriousTwinsParanormal@gmail, and we'll be glad to address that. Facebook and Instagram, we're Curious Twins Paranormal, and you have been listening to Talking to the Dead with Fred. Thank you all, and good night.
You have been listening to Talking to the Dead with Fred. You can join us at aboveparanormal.com. If you have a story to share, or if you feel like you have no one to talk to, please visit us at aboveparanormal.com. Feel free to share with our community in our open forums.